Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Dr. Cammy and Karen Go Keto, where we are here today. It's Dr. Cammy and Mike here together. Mike Collins, our wonderful man from the Sugar Addiction Group, who is a very forefront authority on addiction, on sugar addiction, on how to manage that in a healthy way. We are both basically working toward carnivore diet. I think you're basically carnivore diet, right, Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he drinks lots of water. And so I wanted
Oh,
to,
I got to get my water. Right.
okay, go get your water. Speaking of which, I wanted to just share with you guys that I'm coming off of this binge that I did, and Karen and I have been talking about it in our videos, where I got myself in a situation where I was really under a lot of stress and a lot of time constraint and hadn't been under that in a long time. You know, when I worked 60 hours a week as a doctor and a surgeon, I was under that kind of stress all the time, and I was pretty much used to that. But now that I haven't been under that kind of stress, when I got there, I did not do well. I had a lot of my support systems checked out for the time being. And it was just kind of this perfect mix where I was tired and I was under stress and my support system wasn't there. And I knew it was coming and I called people and I reached out, but it just wasn't enough. I got myself some comfort and relief in an unhealthy way with my carbohydrate foods. And now it's been kind of a struggle to get back. Today, it's been like 12 days since I went off plan. And today, I can't believe it's day 12 already, but I'm feeling really, really strong. Yesterday, I had almost a perfect day as far as eating, but I did eat some carbohydrate foods in the morning. And today, I'm feeling like I'm back on track. So I always like to try to learn, when I've had a relapse, what can I learn from this? And it really has me thinking about stress, about how I handle stress. I have a really good friend that we had some discussions about this earlier this morning, and we were talking about some of my previous videos where I had said that I was a people pleaser and that I know now that when I go to try to do things to please other people, that really it's me and my ego taking over to do what I think I need to do to make myself feel good. And for instance, with my friend who had broke her arm and needed to have her surgery done, instead of having proper boundaries around that and saying, well, I'll be happy to help you if you need help, you know, let me know what I can do to help you. I just kind of took over the whole situation and decided that that was the right thing to do because she was in a lot of pain and she was not, in my opinion, capable of handling it on her own. And so I got everything done to get her in to get her surgery the next day and was terrified that she was going to not be able to do it because she didn't have somebody to take care of her dog. So I agreed to take care of her dog for that day too. And so it just sent me into this really bad binge. And so I wanted to talk with you, Mike, kind of about boundaries and about how I am with people and what goes on in my head, because these thoughts go on in my head that I don't think are like accurate. And I'm starting to question the validity and the reality of the way that my mind thinks in a lot of ways.
Interesting.
Mhm.
So, first of all, I think you've been giving for so long that you're having a difficult time breaking it. You know, the common edict in codependency recovery is feel the guilt and do it anyway. I mean, let your friend handle it herself. And, that's hard for anyone recovering from that. But I do want to go back, and I think it's important before we move forward that if you have journal entries or how much unpacking you and Karen have done in the last episodes that I wasn't on, around day 48, before, the day of, like we had a kind of a breakthrough emotionally like a month ago, or more than 48 days, around 48 days ago, or more than 48 days ago, when you had visited your mother and you had not put two and two together and figured out why you binged that time. There was a lot of tears. There was a lot of like, oh my God, like what happened that day or the day before? Moreover, how were you feeling? What was going on with you on day 48 when you decided or driven by your limbic brain to soothe yourself?
So my son was visiting. I don't know. I like to say when I get in this situation and I'm supposed, I need to think about what was going on and especially try to understand what my feelings were at the time.
Yeah,
I want to check out. Like my MO is to say, well, I don't know what's going on. I just started eating too much food.
right.
That's where I want to go. But
That's where I come in.
I did do some journaling. And so I wrote here that so on day 47, which was the day before the binge started, I wrote here that Michael went home. My son was visiting and he went home and everything seemed to go fine with that visit. He was here for 5 days. We had some really nice discussions about some difficult topics and I did a great job of not bringing them up. I said, if he wants to talk about these things, he can bring them up. And he did bring some topics up and we had some discussions and I think they went really well. And my girlfriend was telling me that it's really good because we were driving, we were in the car driving, so we didn't have direct eye contact, and I think that it might have felt a little bit safer. And she's like, "Yeah," and I'm like, "That's a good place to have a conversation because he can't get out of the car and leave, right? But we're
Yeah.
not having to look at each other anyway." So that went really well. And then I said here, I had a sloppy eating day and I really wanted to give up because I started sneaking stuff in. And I think that that's a clue for me for the future. If I start thinking that I can sneak stuff in to my diet, for example, I started drinking some caffeinated coffee and I thought, oh, Mike's not really right about the caffeine. It doesn't really do a whole lot for me. And sure enough, I started drinking coffee with caffeine in it and 1 cup a day in the morning to get myself some pick me up, which I totally felt because I'm not taking any of my pre workout pill supplements when I work out because they have caffeine in them. So I started drinking some caffeine. I had been doing too many one meal a days. I hadn't been eating enough food for about 3 days because I'm on that GLP-1 agonist and I didn't have an appetite. So I don't think I was getting enough food into my system. And then my support system was down. Like, Karen went to the toy show and my sister was busy with a new baby and my AA sponsor went out of town and I called a couple of people, but I just didn't, they weren't home. And so I had some frustration, some resentment, and some stress. And
Okay. I think we have kind of discovered it. So look, the last time this happened, you kind of spaced the idea that you had visited your mother in that morning. But this time, another key relationship in your life is visiting your space for 5 days, right? And no matter what you've done, if it was perfect, which it was not, no one's is, your thought process about your raising that man, young man, it's like you're just all over the place, let alone the discussions that you had. And this is where we use around the things that we like. The brain is an associating machine. It will associate, like if you see a lot of red, you'll associate with a lot of red. It doesn't matter. It's anchors. There's a million names for it, but it associates with what's going on in your life. And so what was going on in your life was a visit from your son, one of the most important people in your life. And given low self-esteem and not thinking we did everything right, and all of the things that go with that as a parent, and it's a real blatantly obvious thing to me. And how you eased into it, whether it was caffeine or sloppy eating or like whatever, doesn't matter. You're going to ease into it because you're not going to just jump off the deep end. You're going to slowly slide into it. And so when these things come up, we have to be double indemnified. We have to be ready for these things in our lives, whether it's a visit to your mother or a visit to your family. especially your family, you know? And it seems for you. So, I mean, not a mystery to me at all. Like, all you had to do is tell me that. Like, and it's a, it's complex, you know? Every time I go visit my kids, I'm like, the same thing, right? It's like, well, they're great cooks, so let me have a little sweet potato. Let me have a little this. Let me have a little that. And the last one time I actually got sick. And I think, you know, I hadn't been sick in 40 years because I was at a low point and, you know, I was trying to be normal and have veggies and bananas and other crazy stuff
Mhm.
for me, you know. So I get it, you know, and it's very real, and it's the obfuscation or the hiding of the that's what it is, or moreover, in your case, I think, and you can comment on this, is like the not wanting to dive deeper, you know, the not wanting to dive in and understand it. You know, you've had a modality that's worked for decades, and that's to take care of these people, including your own mother. You know, like you're raising your, you were changing your behavior to give her what you thought she needed,
Mhm.
right? And that's always going to cause a problem emotionally, and that you're going to want to soothe from. But with a son, I mean, that's another story. You know, we all think we didn't do it right or didn't do it perfect or we could have done it better. And those little thoughts come in, and, you know, it's like our old pattern would be to just, you know, cover those up to numb them down. So, I mean, it's not a mystery to me, and it's not even a worry to me that that's what happened, you know. The challenge here is to keep, you know, hopefully it won't happen again, but, you know, is to be aware of where these triggers are surfacing, even if likely they're not even that totally conscious. You know, they're not really conscious of, you're not conscious that that's the reason you started drinking a cup of coffee in the morning or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not even worried about it. I just want you to make sure that you're, you know, aware that that's what's going down.
Yes, I see that in retrospect.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
the thing, you said something really key here for me. And you said, that I changed my behavior to give her what I thought she needed with my mother. And that's like the heart of what's going on with me, I think, because I changed my behavior to try to give other people what I think they need. And I think that's it because, like with Michael, like, well, there's with that son, there's a lot of issues there. He was the one that was really close to my other son when my 4.5-year-old passed away. Michael was 7, and the two of them were inseparable. They were really, really good friends.
Mm,
And Brandon, the little one, just worshipped Michael and thought he was the greatest thing. And so Michael lost his best friend, part of his soul, I think, and just really a lot of his identity. And he's a very sensitive guy. He's just the most wonderful young man, and I'm talking about him with his name so people know who I'm talking about. But so I don't want to say a whole lot, but we had a fabulous time. But I do feel some guilt over not over how he was raised because the other son required a lot more time, energy, and effort, and
mm,
Michael kind of lost out on some of that time, energy, and effort because he was the easier son to raise. And they're
mm.
both they're both the most wonderful young men you'll run into now. I mean, we weathered a storm and I stayed sober and we did a really good job, all of us, of coming through. But I never even thought about him coming and how it would be potentially a trigger for me. I was just so excited that I was going to get to see him.
Yeah.
And I did have a party, and I had food in this house for days that were not my food because there were leftover sandwiches. And I didn't eat the sandwiches. I ate some of them with just the inside of the meat.
Mm,
But there were potato chips here too, and I ate some of those. I was weighing and measuring them and eating 1 ounce of potato chips, but I ate them. And one day I remember I ate them twice.
mm.
And I was not reporting this to Mike. So I mean to Jeff. So I was not being authentic with my reporting of my food. And, it was just maybe I was reporting the chips. I don't remember, but there was all kinds of just, not really solidified in what I was, wanting to be up to. But this is it, because I will change my behavior to give people what I think they need.
Yeah. No,
And
I
I,
you know, I'm a big, that's one of my things. That's what I grew up doing it, you know, you had to appease the narcissist in the room, you know, you had to, or be, in my case, the shit beat out of you, but in your case, you know, whatever, there's other penalties, you know?
emotional abuse. It was
Yeah.
emotional, you know,
Yeah.
which I don't know. They're both bad, but sometimes I wished I would have just been whacked on the butt and been done with it,
Right.
because I would
Well, I
get,
got both of them, so I get it. I mean,
I'm so sorry about that. That's really hard.
yeah,
It is what it is, but it's hard. I'm sorry. So
yeah. So
anyway,
let's, you know, I mean, I don't want you to dwell on it. I just want to keep bringing it up when it happens. I want to keep, you know, it in the front of your mind because you are doing what everyone does, which is default back to my behavior around food is this, right? When in reality, it doesn't have anything to do with it. There's a 7-Eleven at every corner. There's whatever, you know, that's not the issue. The issue is, you know, your son was in town. There was whatever it was. It doesn't matter, you know, their relationship to him. You don't think he got enough time. It's that little pang that, well, I didn't give him enough time, that unconsciously or consciously surfaces, and you don't yet have in place a way to soothe that without a substance, or you're just defaulting back to the old standby. So don't worry about it. Just like recognize it. And, you know, you're helping thousands, hopefully sooner or later, millions of people watching these videos that, because they're all doing the same thing. They're like, oh, I must be a terrible at my macros. I didn't, you know, I had this, whatever. Yeah. Doesn't matter. It really doesn't, because that's not what you're looking for. You're not looking to figure out what you ate. You're looking to figure out what made you eat, you know, what was, or go off plan.
mhm.
Yeah.
So one of the things that Karen and I talked about in some of our recent videos was about external versus internal support,
Okay.
and how I feel like, she was talking to me about how a lot of my support feels like it's external. And I agree with her because, like it's like my jacuzzis or going to the sauna or journaling or calling my friends. I mean, journaling, you probably do some internal reflection, and meditation, you probably do, internally looking at what's going on. And
Hmm.
those are the two that I do the least of, I will say.
Okay.
And so it is a little easier for me to say, well, I'll go sit in the jacuzzi. Well, I'll go be in the sauna. I'll go do my exercise class. I'll take a nap. I'll call my friends. I'll go to a meeting. I'll do like these external things. And one of the things that I really want to start working on more is my internal processing and kind of what goes on there, because I feel so empty in there sometimes. And one time years ago, a long time ago, when my first son passed away, this was like in 1996, 1995, 96, 97. I remember I was still drinking alcohol, and I went and saw a therapist, and I was trying to describe in my mind, to, to- I was trying to describe in my mind what was going on. Um, I was trying to describe what was going on inside my body. And I said, there's this big tornado, and it's just always in there inside me. And it just turns around, and there's all this debris and all this stuff going on. And it's in the way of me trying to get stuff done. And here I am sitting myself through medical school and doing all this crazy stuff. But I still have this huge tornado in me. And I figured out that when I sobered up and I quit drinking, that tornado calmed down and basically went away.
Yeah.
And that's what it was, actively using. And so now that I'm, working on sobriety and abstinence, there's just an emptiness there. Like the tornado is gone and there's an emptiness there, which I get to fill up with some cool new stuff that I want to have in there to support me when things start, when this perfect mix starts brewing. And sometimes you can see it coming. Like now I know that, when happy times are coming with relatives, or when difficult times are coming, or whatever kind of time with family and close loved ones, that's a time to really look at things and, beef up my support in some way. But we were talking for a little bit prior to taping today about narcissism and being narcissistic. And I don't know, I wanted to bring that up now. Do you think this is a good time to discuss that?
Yeah, it is. But one quick comment is on your tornado, your storm. Is I think you have you had a tornado, and now I think you have a little storm that's still there. But you described the part, I think, which is huge growth, that there's an emptiness. The storm, the chaos covers up the emptiness. You know what I mean? The going hither and there, and that you don't have time to feel the emptiness. You've created chaos around it, so you don't have to feel it. But now there's only a small, or even maybe a light rain, and it's still there. Now you're beginning to sense that it was the emptiness that was the problem, not necessarily the storm. The storm was maybe a defense mechanism to stop you from feeling the emptiness, right? The chaos is usually kind of a solution to the problem as opposed to the problem. Creating chaos, or even internal or external, is more of a solution than it is the actual problem. It's the emptiness. It's the hole in the soul is the common phrase. That's the issue. So keep an eye out for that, because that is something, until you've worked through a lot of stuff, you can't fill. There's just, like, you have to default back to your old ways. There's no, until you have solid practices in place, you can't fill that damn thing. So please keep an eye out for that. And when you have it, write about it and talk about it, and try and find other ways to soothe it other than substances. That makes sense.
Okay, yeah. I am just coming to this realization by hearing you say that.
Yeah.
That kind of tears me up a little bit because the emptiness feels very vast and large. And so, is that what happened with you? Like when you started dealing with the dark night of the soul, that you were
100%. I
that you were
couldn't,
feeling all the emptiness and
well, I couldn't name the emptiness then. I did have help, and people were telling me the same thing I'm telling you, is like I couldn't name it personally, but it felt like shock, literally like shock. Like, and I don't know if I've ever really had a real shock. Well, maybe, but like it was like this kind of, and it was constant, and it was in my gut or solar plexus.
uh-huh.
And it didn't last all day, but it did, it came and went, but it was definitely real. And I had it. So it wasn't something I invented or something I'd ever experienced before, or maybe something I actually was willing to sit with before. It was,
Hmm.
because I always had a lot of coping strategies as well, and chaos was one of them.
Yeah.
Chaos, living in chaos. So yeah, I'm I'm actually emboldened. I'm like happy that this is a discovery, because this is an important part of it, uncovering the actual feeling in the body of the hole in the soul, or the vast emptiness, as you call it, which is a great descriptor. But yeah, I mean, and again, I hate this phrase, and I hate when I have to tell people, but you have to lean into it. You have to let yourself feel it, and the body's not going to give you any more than you can handle, but you still have to have exercise or yoga or something that you can go do, sleep, whatever, that you can go do to shut it down, that doesn't include chaos or substances.
Yeah, yeah, because a lot of people go through life just ignoring it, doing a human doing. Like that's what
Yes,
I did. My answer was to human do and just go and do and do and do, and then you're not sitting around being a human being at all.
yes.
And so I know that I'm missing. I know that that's been missing in my life, and now I'm just in a really lucky position to be able to deal with that because I'm not working 60 hours a week, and I have some money.
Human doing is one of the number one things. Genuine. It really is.
And also it seems like being like, I didn't really live this way, but a lot of people kind of live where they are expecting things from others and blaming others, for what's going on in their lives. Like,
So
so back to this narcissist business, I wanted, I'm starting to realize that when I say that I people please, that I'm doing things to please others and like trying to help my friend, deciding actually that, I was the one that needed to get her surgery scheduled for her broken arm and actually getting it done, within 36 hours or 24 hours or something, that I don't even know if she really asked for my help. And it's an ego inflation thing. It's an ego thing for me. Part of it is like, oh, look how great I am. I can do this. I'm going to do this. My ego needs to be stroked. And um, look how wonderful I am because I help her, and really helping her has nothing to do with it. It feels like helping her is just an excuse, a way for me to get what I need, which is to feel important and needed and wanted and admired, and all these things that my ego's looking for. And then in the meantime, what that does is that feels in the long run very unfulfilling.
yeah, I mean, another thing is that she would defer to you because you're a doctor, you know. When, like, if you were just a regular person, she could tell you to go pound salt because you don't know anything about it, you know. And so that, you've had that little bit of leverage so that you know what I mean, you can exercise, and this would lead right into the narcissist stuff. But you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, I mean, I can see it very clearly what you're describing.
Yeah, and it makes me realize how self-centered I am. And I knew that, like, dealing with addictions and dealing with, being how addiction is all about what's in it for me, what can I get out of this? And I so that's why I started thinking about being a narcissist, because I was thinking about this the other day. I thought, gosh, I'm so self-centered. Everything that I do in my life is geared around trying to make sure that I'm getting what I need and want, and I mask it through like making, being of service to others. And, I had a career where took care of all these people and did all these wonderful things, which were, I guess, in and of themselves, good things to do. But the underlying theme of it was to make sure that I got what I needed, and that, good care going to them was kind of like a byproduct of it.
Interesting.
And
Yeah, absolutely.
so that has to, and that's why, like, it feels kind of empty. Like, it's just so hard. It's hard for me to explain, but I think it goes back to
You're
what
doing
we,
well. You're doing well. I get it for sure.
you get it? Okay, that's good. And so there's kind of this combination of things going on where I'm looking out for number one, which is always me. And then I have this codependent stuff to like give these people what I think they need, even though it might not be what they need. I kind of make these assumptions and, say, like, because when I looked up the definition of narcissist, it said that it's people who exhibit the personality style of three different things. And one is an inflated sense of self importance, which I definitely have had growing up and being like the one in the family who got, like, all out of seven kids, I got the tap lessons and jazz lessons and piano and swimming and this and the braces and this and that. And then two is the need for admiration, which I strongly have a sense of that. And in my job, I got it all the time. And three, lack of empathy of others, which I thought when I first read that, I thought, no, I tend to be really empathetic with others. I tend to really be able to feel what they feel. And the definition of empathy, I wrote it down. Where is it? Is being able to understand and share the feelings of another. But then I started thinking about that and I thought, I'm really good at that. And then I thought, well, I'm really good at thinking what they should be feeling, like
Yeah.
saying, well, in this situation, most people would feel this way or should feel this way. So I'm just going to kind of assume that this person is feeling this way, instead of saying, well, how are you feeling right now? And listening to that, I'll just assume that they feel this way and that they're going to need this. And then I'll go and do that.
Yeah.
And so that's just kind of, I'm thinking about that. And so we were talking before we were taping about how like narcissism is kind of like a spectrum, right? And from
right.
0 to 10, and how most people hang out at around 1 or 2 because you need some of it to have your, to be normal and healthy. And like, where am I on this spectrum? So I just wanted your take on that.
Well, I got a lot, and I'm really just beginning my writing about it, thinking about it, in that, like, I do believe, and I've had this before, and I don't want to sound like Jack Lang, but like, because it could have started with the original gateway drug, sugar, and addiction in general. So I believe that narcissism, it so far is the way, and I haven't found anything to refute my point of view that I want to get more proof on late, because I've been watching it. I started watching it because I realized that my father was a really severe narcissist. And he took him all the oxygen in the room, and it was always all about him, whatever. But, and that's a big but. My father also did what a narcissist does, in my opinion, or excuse me, a predatory codependent, meaning, which is a term I just thought of just now, a
I love
predatory
it.
codependent, which he found literally the best opposite of him in my mother, right? Which is the one who would put up with all of his whatever, from, it doesn't matter, everything she put up with, literally everything, from like making more money to him and bringing home her paycheck to give to him so he could drive Cadillacs on a prison guard salary. I mean, she like deferred to him for everything, right? Everything. And she was a classic, what people would think of as a codependent, right? And so the narcissist part, and I've seen this before, like when I look at sugar addiction next to the keto flu, they're identical. And there's other things when people start talking about sugar addiction, I start to see that the lupus, or let's use rheumatoid arthritis, okay? I got to find these pictures. I took pictures. I visited my brother, and he's 8 years younger than me, and I had us put our hands next to one another. Okay. It will blow your freaking mind that he already has those deformed joints. Like he's got the curved, like whatever. And he's had colon cancer and prostate cancer operations, okay? And like it's the same thing, okay? So I guess what I'm trying to get at is I believe narcissism is a spectrum of codependency, not a separate disease, okay? And that, because when you talk about the three that you talked about, the elevated self-esteem, check, fits. I forget what the second one was, but the third one was the being able to feel others' emotions, right? That's just a read in the room of a codependent. So you could have both sides of the spectrum of codependency, you know what I mean? And it would be good for the predatory narcissist, quote unquote, the predatory codependent, because they can feel the room and then give the room what they need. The part that pisses me off the most, like reincarnation, where everybody is reincarnated as Caesar or Cleopatra, is that narcissists are always described as charismatic, attractive, blah, blah, blah. The predatory ones, the ones that have narcissistic personality disorder, right? Like, that's not physically, statistically possible, because only 5% of people are considered attractive, right? It's like, that's just not possible. Okay, that part of it's not possible. And so I do believe that, we are dealing with extremes, or like you say, spectrums of codependency that, have been given another name, and or the lack of acceptance of codependency as an issue in life, as an issue
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
disease and what have you. So, again, I'm very new and early, and I don't know if I articulated it well, but I do believe that we are dealing with the same animal here. And I have gone through this whole thing. Oh, what I was going to say about the empathy part is that I am an INFJ, like less than 1% of people, and less than 50% of that are male. And I know in my heart that I really do feel other people's emotions. You know what I mean? And I do know that I've used other people's emotions into my benefit, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
it's not that I don't have them. It's that it's how you use them, right? It's not it's a gift of sorts. Like, and the other one's true empathy for people. I think I have true empathy for people, but like you, I may be 3 or 4 on the spectrum of what is called narcissism now, or on some of these things, or and again, equating or putting the two together is going to be, part of the work that I'm trying to do. But it's a great topic. But in my world, the description of a narcissist fits perfectly with the description of an addict. It's almost identical. Like the behavior pattern is identical. And if the predatory narcissist can find a subservient, if you will, codependent, then both are screwed. You know what I mean? Like they find their own level. They
Mhm.
need the other's energy. But this idea that the narcissist pulls the predatory narcissist, the predatory codependent pulls the energy from the dependent narcissist is bullshit, because like they have their time in the sun as well. When their behavior when the narcissist quote unquote behavior is bad, then the subservient narcissist comes, or subservient codependent comes in, and then they're in charge. They're the boss. And here's another last part of
Mhm.
this. In every codependent relationship, the one who appears to be in charge, which in this case would track with the predatory narcissist or the predatory codependent, it's always the opposite. So it's always likely the subservient codependent, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? They're always the one in charge. My mother was always in charge, but it never appeared that way. You know what I mean? Again, it's a very complex topic, and it's one I think I might have been, excuse my language, screwing with in some way to stay out of true personal development or true personal growth. But in doing so, I've kind of developed these thought processes that I think are real. And I don't know if that's the case with you. You do not strike me as a narcissist in the predatory sense. You strike me as a codependent who has blips, like into the, use it when you need it kind of thing,
Mhm.
right? Use it when it benefits you kind of thing. And also to obfuscate and tamp down your own feelings, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Does that make any damn sense? Because that was you allowed me to be the first person I ever explained that, what I've been thinking about for freaking years.
Yeah, but it made sense to me with knowing how your dad, was so abusive and so uh this predatory narcissist.
Yeah.
Um because I feel that with my mom, she was very predatory, and she did the best she could. I mean, honestly, but
And that's wait, time out. That's also a common refrain of children of adult alcoholics or children of adult codependents, is that they did the best they can. It's whether it's true or not, it's not a way out. It's just not.
no, it's not an excuse for her for her behavior. Yeah. But as far as empathy goes, like I remember one time, I'll never forget this. I walked into a room to see a new patient, and I sat down on the stool and I looked up at her up on the table, and I had this feeling come over me, and I said to her, I just looked at her for a few seconds and I just took a deep breath and I said, I feel so down in this room. I feel so depressed. I mean, the whole room, you could feel it. I could feel the whole room just
Right.
like this. And she ended up being like really suicidal and like having a plan. And, we had to call people and we had to like really take care of her. And I just couldn't believe that I walked into the room and sat down. And not only did I feel it, but I said something, I was just like, God, I feel so down. I didn't know what she was going to say, but so I do think that I can feel like people feel, that I can even almost feel the energies of them sometimes. And so I do think that I have some empathy toward others,
Yeah.
but I do feel that I manipulate people in some ways to satisfy what my needs are. Like I'll say, oh, well, this person's feeling this, and because I need them to feel this so that I'll feel this about myself. I just wonder, it's going to be interesting to see how I am in the world, in the upcoming months, and
Yeah.
how I feel and behave and respond to things. And there was one other thing I was going to say about when people are about being able to listen in like a non-judgmental way and a neutral way about what people's feelings and needs are, as opposed to me putting my take on it and my spin and what do I need to think they're thinking or whatever so that I can make myself feel okay.
That's a great description. Really. That's a great description. And a great awareness, moreover, you know. It's a great awareness that this is something that you do. Because I understand it. It makes sense to me, you know. And this kind of egoic, I'm a doctor, I know best for you stuff is kind of, for me, in a lot of ways in life, is hidden by a false modesty, like a false humility, excuse me, like a false, when in reality, there's a song, I forget the name of the whole song, but there's lyrics that goes, I'm the maker of rules dealing with fools. I can read your mind, right? I have to find the song for you, and it used to be kind of my theme song. Reggie Jackson used to be my favorite baseball player because he was so arrogant and so cocky. And that was kind of how I felt as a young man, you know? And so there was a lot of comeuppance that I had to change in order to get out of that. Wax upside the head with a baseball bat kind of thing, like, consequences of that behavior. But I would be lying to tell you that that wasn't how I actually felt.
Mm.
So I think you're coming upon that, whether or not that was you or not, or if you're similar.
Yeah, I don't know. I still don't have a strong sense of self. And how old am I now? In my 60s?
Well, mine was fake, you know. It was
Mine was always, who do you want me to be? Mine was like,
right,
who do I need to be to get basically the most attention in the
right,
family of 7? And so I learned that whatever I did to make my mom look good was what got me attention. So I just excelled as best as
yeah,
I could at everything.
yeah.
But I wanted to
It's
go back to,
amazing that you're not even the firstborn, right?
no, I'm number 5.
It's amazing that you got so much positive, and I think it is because you figured out making her look good got you stuff or whatever, got you positive stuff, positive
Attention.
attention. Yeah. And the rest of them never figured it out. They shouldn't have to figure it out, but and whether you figured it out consciously or unconsciously, it worked.
Yeah.
And so you
So
were playing the dependent, subservient narcissist to her predatory one. You know what I mean? And now,
mhm.
you know, you were doing the manipulation, which is like, again, I don't know if you did it consciously or like completely consciously, but you figured out a system that worked. But
Yeah,
in the long run, you can tell that system is not sustainable and it doesn't work well.
it doesn't work well because like something's got to give, and
Yeah,
what
exactly.
gives is you're comforting yourself in these unhealthy addictive ways,
Yeah,
whatever it is.
you knew you were not doing the right thing, quote unquote, and you knew what the right thing was. So in order to not feel the guilt of not doing the right thing, you use substances.
Yeah, yeah. Wow,
Yeah,
that's interesting. I never like thought of that.
yeah. I
But
mean,
the other thing I was going to say was when we were talking about the thing, when I forgot what I was going to mention, was motives, that word, like what, because the other thing I want to pay attention to is like, what are my motives around how I communicate with others or what I think and feel about things? Like, what are my motives around that? And like, what are my intentions? Like,
yeah,
because I don't, I don't like parts of me now, I don't like parts of me that, I don't want to be going around manipulating and, thinking these things in my head, because I'm getting a little bit confused about like what are my thoughts versus what is reality, like what's really happening versus, because what reality is how you take in the environment, you assimilate it, and then, you decide that this is what is real. And that can be changed without even getting stoned or whatever, right?
Right.
Like based on what your motives or intentions are.
Right.
So I don't know. Those are just things that I'm thinking about as I try to get, as I stay sober and abstinent and
I
get
had
rid of.
a sponsor once tell me there's a grading time between awareness and willingness. I think that you're like aware, and that's good. And willing to change takes time. And then in between, it's like, so, I mean, personally, I don't see you as doing that, but you're being very honest and revealing that there are parts that you're still doing that kind of manipulation to get what you need. They're not necessary usually at this juncture in your life anymore, like your mom. Like that way of getting things you need emotionally or otherwise aren't required anymore. You don't need them anymore. Like, so they don't
Right,
serve well. They don't serve you, but
right.
they're still hard. Still a hard thing to break because they did work.
Yeah.
I mean, even later in life, I'm sure, you know, with your mother, not when you were, you know,
When I think back on my marriage, I was married for 13 years and how that
yeah.
was so much, such an unhealthy, dysfunctional
Well, let's
relationship.
look at that real quick. Would you say the colloquial slang is wore the pants in the family?
Well, I thought I did.
Okay, so there we go. You know what I mean?
I
And
mean, I
so,
was the primary bread earner and, I made the money and I owned
did you take
everything.
advantage of that as the primary friend? As far as things you needed and wanted, which may not have been may or may not have been.
I don't think so.
Well, think about it because I was in that relationship once, and just recently, actually, my last relationship. So, and she, she did take advantage of it in ways that were probably not appropriate. Definitely not. So, but it feeds right into maybe some unpacking of that feeds right into the discussion we're having, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, it does. And that would be maybe something to look at in the past. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to mention too is that I have a new therapist that I'm going to see on Tuesdays.
Cool.
And she seems to be really helpful to help me kind of sort through some of this and figure things out.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
So,
Cool.
nice neutral third party, to
Do
bounce
they
stuff
have
off
a
of.
addiction background, codependency background?
Yeah, it was funny because I was calling the company and I was talking. I said, "Well, what's her background in?" And they said something like addiction, codependency, eating disorder, trauma, and grief. And I'm like, "Oh, I have all five."
Perfect.
So it was pretty funny.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you feel like this is a good stopping point?
Yeah, this has been wonderful.
Yeah, we'll continue with the next session next week and we'll see where I stand and where I've made progress and where I haven't and what's going on.
All right. If you got any of those triggers coming up, doesn't necessarily have to be family either, whatever.
Yeah,
Remember, it's
yeah,
probably people with you.
yeah. I'll be watching and journaling too. That helps to
Cool.
reflect.
All
All right,
righty.
everybody. Take good care. Thank you, Mike.
Bye bye.
Bye.